Good afternoon. My name is Diane Ryan. I am from Tidewater Community College. Thank you so much for attending this session on authentic leadership. Just to give you a little bit of background about myself, I love the field of leadership. I have not done any research in leadership, but I hope to one day. Over my years at TCC, I've been at TCC for a long time, first as an adjunct, then as a faculty member, and then in the last 2 years as an academic dean. So over my many years at TCC, I've had a multitude. I think I counted it up last night. I've had 9 deans when I was a faculty member. I've worked under 4 provosts and 3 presidents. So I've had the opportunity to observe leaders in all sorts of different roles. So what made me interested in leadership was I am currently in the Community College Leadership Program at Old Dominion University. And last spring of 2016, I took our leadership class there, and I was fascinated by all the different forms, shapes, styles of leaders. My faculty background is in public speaking, and that was everybody's favorite class to take. Not really. Everybody hates public speaking, and actually I understand why today, because it is nerve-wracking to get up and give a presentation. And but I used to tell my students all the time, you can do this, you can do this. And we used to practice. We'd do a bunch of 4 or 5 little mini speeches that were non-graded up until they gave their first graded speech about week 5 in the semester. Well, you know what? The same is true for leadership. I believe just like learning to deliver an effective speech, learning to become a leader is a skill. It's not about personality. It's not about characteristics. It's about having the right skills. In my leadership class last spring, we learned about servant leadership, authoritarian leadership, dynamic leadership, accountable leadership. And at the end, we had to take leadership questionnaires to figure out what category we fell into. And I fell into authentic leadership. And so that's when I started reading more about it. Last fall, I had the opportunity to go to the VCCS Leadership Academy, where I met Lou. And where's Dixie? Oh, there she is, yeah. And that was a dynamic experience. So if you do have the opportunity to do that, or you want to do that someday, I suggest you go back to your colleges and ask, say, because they do it every fall, and it's 3 days of intensive leadership training. And go back to your college and ask, hey, is that coming up next fall? If so, I'd really like to go. You know, can you send me? It's a great experience. All right, so let's look at my title. Change the classroom, the department, and the boardroom with authentic leadership. So when you are changing something or you're undergoing change, what is another word for change that we tend to hear quite often right now? Very good. And Paul wins the prize. Good job, Paul. That's right. Change is transforming, right? And I bet you've heard the word transforming it probably at least 5 or 6 times during this whole conference. When you go back, you should be excited because this has been a fantastic conference. You learn about all new things to take back into your classroom, into your department, to let your colleagues know about ways that you can help your students. So you've been transformed. Does it work that easily? You'll get back, you'll talk about your ideas, and what happens? Thank you. Right. Nothing. Why do you think that occurs? Why? We talk about transformational behavior. We talk about transformational change. We want leaders that are transformational. But why do you think it doesn't happen? It's hard and it's stressful. Right. You're absolutely right. I also believe is because we've taken it a step too far. Before you can become transformational, you first have to become authentic. And that's where I want to start today. So over the next few minutes, we're going to be looking at what makes up authentic leadership, the skills that you need to become an authentic leader. Then I'm just going to highlight a few studies because actually authentic leadership is it's new in the field of leadership. So there's not a lot of research out there about it. We're going to have the opportunity to take the Authentic Leadership Questionnaire, and I'm not going to collect those back. You're going to take them home with you, and you'll score them right here, and we'll talk about ways that we can, areas that we scored in. And then hopefully we'll have some time here for questions and answers. One of the great things, when I got the email that I'm scheduled for 4 o'clock on Thursday, I was like, oh, okay. But this is a great audience. I was hoping for 8, so I really appreciate you all coming. But I learned a really good thing about going last, is I got to listen to everybody else speak on leadership at the conference. So I want to start with something that Dr. Raspiller said, the president of John Tyler Community College, yesterday at his session on visionary leadership. Leadership is about getting people to think differently, getting people to follow you because it's the right thing to do, not to follow you just because of a paycheck. So for the faculty that are in the room today, you are the leaders in your classrooms. The deans, directors, managers, and coordinators, and vice presidents, you are the leaders of your departments. And if we have any presidents in the room, you are the leaders of your college and your board. If any one of you wants to transform any of these situations, you will first need to look at your own authentic leadership style. Now, excuse me, let me just take a sip of this. Authentic leadership, as I mentioned before, is relatively new in the field of leadership studies. There was something that happened in the late 90s, or mid-90s, that caused the field of authentic leadership to emerge. Something big in business, where people who had worked for a company for 40 years and lost every dime that they invested in these companies. Anybody remember that? Enron, that's right. Enron and WorldCom are the driving force behind authentic leadership. It was a business concept first by businessman Bill George, who was the CEO of Medtronics, who, after that happened, and he saw so many employees' lives turned upside down, he decided to push the field of ethics, self-awareness, balanced perspective, and transparency. A few years later, 3 business professors jumped on the bandwagon and started researching authentic leadership. Bruce Ovilio, who's now at Rice University, is effective just this March 1st, William Gardner, who's at Texas Tech, and Fred Walabawa, who's at Arizona State University. So you'll hear their names. This is hard for me to stand back here behind the microphone. Oh, I forgot my favorite slide. I'm so sorry. So when you go back to your colleges, it's not just a matter of waving your magic wand. You probably have seen this before, but I love it. But sometimes we come back with all these good ideas, and it's like, okay, I'm not bossy, it's my leadership skills. But as we're going to learn, it's not about waving your magic wand. All right, so the components of AL, which is short for authentic leadership. Self-awareness. This means, are you aware, as a leader, are you aware of your strengths and weaknesses and how they impact others? So when I became a dean in 2015, I remember I was so excited. I really wanted to be a dean. I love faculty, love students, and it's the best job to combine the both of them. And I had one, at that time, as many of you know, the Faculty Development Evaluation Plan was coming into effect. So that was, it was a difficult time to get used to that change, and that's been a transformational change for our system. So the faculty of my department, division, didn't know me, so they sent in their faculty senate chair to talk to me about if I would take the FD, or I'm not the summative evaluation on paper rather than electronically. I said, no, I'm sorry, I will not. Because if someone doesn't know how to use the portfolio online, perhaps they shouldn't be in the classroom because we're teaching more and more with technology. Her face turned bright red. Now, I looked at her and I said, I'm sorry, I feel like I've caught you off guard. And she said, I'm just not used to people being direct. So, yes. So just because you're trying to practice authentic leadership does not mean that you can't be direct. Because if you're direct as an authentic person, as a true person, that's okay. But you just need to be aware of what your strengths or your weaknesses may be. Transparency. Oftentimes I hear, and you probably do too, I hear this being thrown around. Okay, so I thought the college was going to be transparent. I thought we were going to know everything. I thought we were going to live in this field of openness. But transparency is not really about telling everything. It's the degree to which the leader experiences openness with the people that are that they're following. In terms of, is your leader, or as a leader, are you open to listening to others' ideas? Okay. Are you open to, if they do have a concern, that they can come to you and they know that you're not going to get defensive and you're going to listen to them? And it's about, are you open to if they want to challenge you on something that you do? So transparency is more about being open to the opinions, the thoughts, and the feelings of the people that you're leading. It's not about knowing everything and being exposed to everything. The ethical, moral dimension of authentic leadership is role modeling. It's building trust, backing your students, and backing your faculty. I know as a faculty member, my students would always kind of be put off because I loved to have an atmosphere where they came in and they felt really welcomed in my classroom. I loved greeting them every single class period by their name, and I wanted them to feel welcome. I love to smile at them because I think that's really, really important when they walk in the door, because it may be the only smile they see all day long. Then when they'd come to me and say, I wasn't able to get that speech outline written. Can I turn it in next class? No. They'd be shocked because they would think, oh, she's nice, she smiles at me. There's no accountability here. But once students realized that the accountability was there, then, and I was consistent across the board, then we never had an issue with that. It's the same when you're leading a group of people. Once you decide what people are going to be accountable for, and you carry that across the board, then just a simple, nope, that's not going to work out that time because it really wouldn't be right for everybody else. So it's about role modeling the right, or the behavior that you want your followers to have. Balanced process. To what degree does the leader involve others when making decisions? Now, I got to back up for just a second. The components of authentic leadership usually work 80% of the time, okay? And I'll give you an example. We've had 2 tornadoes in the Tidewater area in the last week. Okay? The one was the other day while school was going on. So we had to not evacuate the building, but go to our safe spaces within the building. So that may not, when you walk up to a classroom and say, I'm sorry, you're going to have to leave the 3rd floor. We're all going to have to go to room 4103 that has no windows or glass doors and is shelter in place. You're kidding, right? No, I'm serious. So that's not the time for authentic leadership. There are times when you have to be a leader, but in a sense, I really think of that more as a manager. You've got to be a manager because it's your job to keep those people safe. Just like faculty, it's your job to keep your students safe. So, moving on to balanced processing. Most decisions are better decisions when they're made as a group, right? Yes, what? Right. So when leaders run into trouble or when managers, because we manage and we lead, run into trouble is when they make all decisions independently. So that's the 4th component. So self-awareness, transparency, ethical and moral, balance, and balanced processing are the 4 components. All right, I want to just quickly go over, I just want to quickly go over these studies. Just to show you some of the results that have happened. This study was done with 324 managers, filled out the ALQ, which you guys are going to do here in just a few minutes, and all their subordinates filled out a 42-item managerial effectiveness questionnaire. So when they did a correlation between the 2 of them, they found that authentic leadership was statistically significantly related to managerial dimensions of organizational performance, satisfaction of followers' needs, and improvement in the quality of work life. Higher AL scores were significantly related to decreased negative attitudes of followers. Now, this was not in higher ed, this was in a business, and it was in India. Okay, so that's how new this particular field is. This study was done at an American business, survey of 400 people in middle management positions, 45% men, 55% women. And they surveyed their employees with managerial effectiveness scale. And this study used the Authentic Leadership Inventory Survey, which is a 45-item scale, Likert scale, that includes questions about symmetrical communication. Now, if you're not familiar with what symmetrical communication is that's communication that flows both ways, okay? It's not just one way down, it flows both ways, and it's rooted in the component of openness. And results showed that AL is positively significant with an organization's symmetrical and transparent communication. This was an article, not a study, about a conceptual model for measuring authentic leadership in higher ed and in the work climate. Because the authors of this article found that and I'm going to hand these, you're going to get a folder with all these, or a reference sheet with all these studies if you want to look them up on your own. But the authors of this particular article found that people at work feel like they're valued more, that they're listened to more, and that their work and their opinions count when they work in an atmosphere of inclusion. And the best way to develop that atmosphere of inclusion is through this conceptual model of authentic leadership. And then finally, my last study, this was interesting. This was done on women leaders in higher ed. So they were at executive level positions. And this was a qualitative study, so it was done through interviews, not through surveys. And they found the positive emerging theme from this study was that the development of deeper relationships at work, the leaders found that, and also their employees reported that. But the negative part, or the negative emerging theme, was there was bureaucratic structures that negated the ability to lead authentically. And I think that we all see that at one time or another in our lives. So this is what I say to people when they say, well, why would I take on something? Why would I try to become a more effective leader when every time I do, in my classroom or in my division or in my department, somebody up top shuts it down, or they tell me that this is coming down and I have to make my people do that. Why should I be authentic when the people above me are not being authentic? And my answer is this. Anytime in life, we can only control our circle influence. Everybody has a circle of influence. I could come back and talk about that some other time, but it's so important. So once you figure out who your circle influence is, those are the people you should focus on. Don't worry about what's going on up there. Worry about what's going on in your circle. Okay, I'm going to come back to that. I'm going to hand out a folder, and in the folder is a blue questionnaire. And if you would go ahead and fill that questionnaire out. Now that'd be great if you could hand out the folders. Now, as you're filling out this questionnaire, because we are live streaming, we cannot have dead airspace, okay? So I'm going to be reading the questions to you, all right? So, but just, fill them out on your own. So don't feel like that. You have to listen to what I'm saying, but. So that's this blue sheet right here. So don't look at the second sheet yet. Just go through and fill out the front, and then once you have it completely filled out, you can flip it over to the back side, to the blue side. Everybody's got a pen, right? Oh, Dr. Rubin needs a pen. I've been waiting to say that. Okay, Authentic Leadership Self-Assessment Questionnaire, and this was developed by Avolio and Gardner. This questionnaire contains items about different dimensions of authentic leadership. There are no right or wrong responses, so please answer honestly. Use the following scale when responding to each statement by writing the number from the scale below that you feel most accurately characterizes your response to the statement. This is a Likert scale, and 1 is strongly disagree, 2 equals degree, 3 equals neutral, 4 equals agree, 5 equals strongly agree. First question, I can list my 3 greatest weaknesses. Question number 2, my actions reflect my core values. Number 3, I seek others' opinions before making up my own. Number 4, I openly share my feelings with others. Number 5, I can list my greatest strengths. Number 6, I do not allow group pressure to control me. Number 7, I listen closely to the ideas of those who disagree with me. Number 8, I let other know who I am as a person. There should be an S there. I let others know who I am as a person. Number 9, I seek feedback as a way of understanding who I am as a person. Number 10, other people know where I stand on controversial issues. Number 11, I do not emphasize my own point of view at the expense of others. Number 12, I rarely present a false front to others. Number 13, I accept the feelings I have about myself. Number 14, my morals guide what I do as a leader. Number 15, I listen very carefully to the ideas of others before making decisions. Number 16, I admit my mistakes to others. So if you flip over to page 2 here, you'll see the scoring. And on your own, again, I'm not collecting this, you want to sum up your responses on answers 1, 5, 9, and 13 for self-awareness. You want to sum the responses on items 2, 6, 10, and 14 for internalized moral perspective. You want to summarize the answers for 3, 7, 11, and 15 for balanced processing. And then for relational transparency, you want to sum the responses on 4, 8, 12, and 16. Then there's an area there for you to write down your scores for self-awareness, internalized moral perspective, balanced processing, and relational transparency. And then the scoring interpretation. The self-assessment questionnaire is designed to measure your authentic leadership by assessing 4 components of the process: self-awareness, internalized moral perspective, balanced processing, and relational transparency. By comparing your scores on each of these components, you can determine which are your stronger and which are your weaker components in each category. You can interpret your authentic leadership scores using the following guidelines. High is between 16 and 20, and low is 15 and below. Scores in the upper range indicate strong authentic leadership, where scores in the lower range indicate weaker authentic leadership skills. But that's not necessarily a bad thing, okay? If you score less than a 15, we're going to talk about that in a minute. So I'll let you add those up as I talk about some inherent weaknesses, and I'm going to go ahead and take this out of here because I can't. It's so hard for me to stand in one place. Okay, so what are some positive? As I said, now this will be the 3rd time. This is an emerging research field. I am not doing my dissertation on it, though, but let me tell you, there are some really wonderful dissertations on authentic leadership. I didn't bring them today because you're only supposed to present peer-reviewed research, so I hope that the people that have written them will get them published soon. So some positive features is it provides an answer to people who are searching for good and sound leadership in an uncertain world. And I think if you heard Senator Warner today, we live in an uncertain world. And if you wanted to hear an example of an authentic leader today, that would be Senator Warner. So I hope you were lucky enough to catch his presentation. It's prescriptive and provides a great deal of information about how leaders can learn to be authentic. Remember, just like public speaking skills, these are authentic leadership skills. They can be learned. It has an explicit moral dimension that asserts that leaders need to do what is right and good for their followers and society. And it's framed as a process developed by leaders over time rather than a characteristic. So in other words, it's just like learning how to ride a bike or play the piano. I truly believe that. Some negative features are that results of the studies have to be questioned or treated cautiously because there is not a lot of research specifically on authentic leadership. The moral component of AL is not fully explained. There are a couple of articles out there that will say, well, even bad leaders or leaders who choose to do harmful things to people are being authentic because that's who they are. So that moral component still needs to be fleshed out in the research. The rationale for including positive psychological capacities as an inherent part of model of AL has not been fully explicated. And again, that has to do with a lack of research. And there's a lack of evidence regarding the effectiveness of AL and how it's related to positive organizational outcomes. So all four of those negative things have to do with the lack of research. So that's why I encourage you, if you find this interesting, to go out and study about it. I've been watching the time. Oh, good. We've got some time. Does anybody want to share any kind of surprising result from your questionnaire? If you don't, it's okay. I've got some, because we've got some strategies to talk about to improve our AL. Anything surprising that anybody found, or any questions thus far? That's okay. It's late in the day. I know. All right. So let's talk about some strategies. So what happens? Did you end up lower in one area than you thought you would? Authentic leadership skills develop over time. There's a few tips that were put out by Walla Lambois, Dr. Walla Lambois, about developing the different areas. The first one is, when you are interacting with your followers, be in the moment. So what that basically means in terms of communication skills is practice active listening skills. It is so easy for us to get distracted and start thinking about something else, like, oh my gosh, I've got to get out of the door in 15 minutes to go meet with somebody else, or oh, I forgot to grade that student's paper and they're going to ask me about it after class. But when someone is talking to you, you have to first train yourself as an active listener and be in the moment with them. Once you let's say, let me go back. When did I do that? Here we go. Let me go back to the four components. Let's say that you scored low on 3 out of the 4 of these, okay? No big deal. I actually scored low on 2 when I took it. So what do you do in that case? Do you try to work on all 3 at once? No. You work on 1 at a time. I'm a big believer of that, because I'm sure you probably all are listening to all those fabulous presentations about student success, the Excellent in Education Award that will be announced tonight. We all have a lot of change going on at our colleges, and after a while, you can get initiative fatigue. So just choose one of these to focus on. Develop a ritual for that one. If active listening is not your strong point, then learn to become an active listener. Learn everything that you can about that. And then start using those techniques to listen actively. It's called through the law of repetition. To be an authentic leader and to develop the skills in all 4 areas, you need to be strong enough to work through the process. Remember, it's authentic, then it's transformational, and then the change occurs. It's okay not to know the answers. I am very fortunate where I am the Dean of Social Sciences and Humanities at the Chesapeake campus of TCC. I have 24 full-time faculty that report to me, and they really are a tremendous caring group of faculty, and they're wonderful to our students. And they're anxious to try new things to try to reach students, because we all know that learning is changing, whether we like it or not, it is. So one of my faculty members, he said, I'm gonna, actually it was an English faculty member, and they spent a year meeting just on their own, learning about adult learning principles. So he said, I'm gonna turn my classroom upside down this year. He said, we're gonna come in, they're gonna have the syllabus, but they're gonna decide on the due dates. Okay, they're gonna decide how much each assignment is worth, and they're gonna decide, what the grading scale is for the assignments. Halfway through the semester, yeah, I'm looking at Nicole's face. Halfway through the semester, I'm not supposed to walk around too much. Halfway through the semester, thanks to me, he came into me and he said, I can't do it. I just can't do it. I said, why? What's wrong? They said it was, giving students responsibility for their learning. And he said, it's freaking us all out too much. And I said, who? And he said, the students and I. Like the first vocab list I handed out, I'm like, okay, when do you think this should be due? And they're like, huh? No, your spell is supposed to tell us when it's due. And he said, no, we're going to negotiate these things. So what he ended up doing is taking on too much change initiative at once. Maybe doing that with, maybe having the students decide on the rubric for one assignment or the due date for one assignment. And that's what happens sometimes is we take too much on, and so it becomes overwhelming, and we don't want to do what? We don't want to work through the process. And that's really where change occurs. When you are trying to change something, the process can be incredibly messy. It can be full of conflict, contradiction, feelings of uncomfortable. So you, as an authentic leader, you've got to be able to work through those feelings. I know lots of people that are in positions of leaderships that have great ideas, but when it comes to execution, it's very difficult to work through the process. I make this a habit, and I hope you do too as you start on this journey. You want to make sure that you spend time with people who are uplifting. I cannot stress this enough, especially in the work atmosphere. Walk with people who want to see you successful. Once again, I am very lucky at the Chesapeake campus. 2 of my colleagues are here to support me today, and one of my colleagues from my CCL program, and also one of my faculty members, which I really appreciate. So choose who you hang with. I love this one too. I've got 2 more, then we're done. Live in excellence, but not in perfection. Because what is the problem with living in perfection? Yes, the stress will cause you to fail. That's right. So always strive to do your best, to go through the process, to work through that process, and it can get ugly. It can get ugly. But know that you're doing your best, that you're approaching it with self-awareness, transparency, a moral perspective, and you're trying to get a balanced process. You're trying to find out, is this a good idea? And last but not least, flexibility. It is key to learning how to become an authentic leader. The more flexible you are in your job, now this is 80% of the time, 80%, remember, follow that 80-20 rule, the better off you're going to be. Over the last 4 years before I became a dean, I was doing all the scheduling. I was, what do we call them at that time? Faculty, well, I guess we still call them faculty leads. Yeah, I was a faculty lead for English and speech classes at our Virginia Beach campus. So that's when I began on that journey of learning to be flexible. People are going to get upset as things change. But just as long as you know that you followed your 4 components, you don't need to worry about that. and just be flexible. Let it go. Next time you see them, it's a new day, and you carry on. If you have to switch gears, the most powerful words that you can say is, I was wrong, I am sorry, let's restart this. And so many leaders are afraid to say that. Don't be, if you want to be an authentic leader. People really appreciate that. All right, we've got, I've got 5 minutes, right, for questions? Oh, 4 minutes for questions. Okay, any questions or scenario?
Let's use the microphone so the folks live streaming can hear us.
Hi, Diane. Thank you for your presentation. I was just thinking that the transparency component of authentic leadership is kind of relative, because there's an amount of transparency that's good for a leader, and then if you do too much, you could almost scare your followers when there are situations that maybe they don't need to know every single detail regarding that. Did you see anything in your research about that?
Actually, no, I haven't. So that would be another great emerging field. But I think that you bring up a really good point, and that, that's why I hope I was careful when I define that, because transparency is not just letting it all out. There's TMI is not a good thing. Okay, so, or even knowing if things are coming down, if you're in a position where that things may or may not be coming down the pike, you don't want to let your followers know, or your students know, your faculty know, your department know, unless you know for sure that change is going to take place. A lot of colleges are facing some uncertain times right now. And one of the things that I always tell the people in my division when they come in and ask, what's going on, I'll say to them, which I honestly don't know, but I will say it's really important that we focus on the people that we have here, okay, and not so much the organization, because we can't really control the organization, but we can focus on our people, our circle of influence. Thank you.
Thanks. I really enjoyed hearing about that, and I liked your definition of that transparency, where it's where people feel comfortable that they can come to you regardless of whether you can tell them everything.
Right.
One of the questions I really struggled with was number 4. I openly share my feelings with others, and depending on your role, how much should feelings come into that versus opinions or thoughts on things? And then sometimes we should bite our tongues and not say what we're really feeling, because we're meant to carry the party line once those decisions are made and we know we have to move forward. So I struggled a little bit with that number 4, and I wondered your thoughts on that one.
Yeah. Do I have time?
Another minute?
I got a minute. Okay, a minute. Okay, so that's a really great question. How much do you share about feelings? I think that it's important that you recognize their feelings. Recognize that they're frustrated, or they feel devalued, or something, or overworked, or asked to do another thing, and that recognition is really important. Then you try to tie it back to what the ultimate goal is, because I think we're all in the same boat. Our ultimate goal is we need to attract, retain, and complete our students, right? And that's really the bottom line. And so it's really recognizing their feelings first and saying, yeah, I know this is going to be a lot of work, and I know the college is asking you to do another thing. And you know what? We're going to try to work together here as a division or as a class to get this accomplished. One of the things, I'm actually having a division meeting. Am I out of time? I'm having a division meeting in a week, and we have some changes coming down the pike that I'm going to have to talk to the faculty about, just with some format, not things with our online classes and our syllabus and stuff. And this might be a time for them to engage their students in and having a voice in what's going on in the class. And so that's the way that I'm going to try to present it. I don't know if that answered your question. Thank you all so much for coming. I appreciate it. Have a great rest of the time at New Horizons.